Good morning. Today's Friday, March 14th. We are the Ways and Means Committee. And we're starting our morning off hearing from two of our colleagues on bills they have sponsored that are on our wall, as we do every Friday morning. And then the rest of the day is everything we're doing today has a warned vote on it. From today until next Friday, that will be true every day. So appreciate if folks narrow their schedules towards this room. And morning after the floor, hoping to vote out our tax credit expansion bill. If you want to talk about anything related to that, please let me know please talk to me before we get to it. And we will have a fiscal note that we'll review before we vote. And then after lunch, we have a cannabis bill and that other OPR bill. And maybe there will be a third bill added this afternoon, but I do hope to get out of here as well. Many people in the building have asked me if we are working this coming Monday. We are not. But that means because we're not, it means we need to be even more focused next week. So please, if you have, whatever committee is your committee of focus, please try to be checking in with me and Bill about bills that you know are coming here. Some of them are coming a little more loaded than I expected them to be. And so doing some legwork in advance is sometimes helpful. And I think that's all my housekeeping. Oh, Representative Burkhart's bill that I misread and thought she was reporting yesterday, she's reporting today. It was just on notice yesterday. So I hope you can all read the calendar diligently so someone can correct me next time I do that. And with that, Representative Bartley and Galfetti, would you like to join us and tell us about your bill, however you want to do it? They're similar but different. Same vibe, different detail.
Yes, definitely. Same vibe, different details. Thank you for having us in. For the record, I'm Representative Ashley Bartley. I serve Fairfax in Georgia.
And for the record, Rep. Jean Galfetti, I serve Berrytown and Old Sliver, Williamstown.
And so it's kind of like that old attaché that great minds think alike. So we actually came up with these different bills not together. And that to be said, the bill that is on your wall that I've sponsored has come from many conversations with builders, with developers who I've met with individually, who've come into my committee and who have testified before us, saying that, you know, I think it's something that we can all tell that making building housing is not financially viable for a lot of our builders, which is just exacerbating our housing crisis. So my bill had originally come up with that idea, how to give some sort of ease to our builders in the state. And I originally was very concerned with how much money it would cost to what the bureaucracy would look like if we tried to kind of shave it down and look at only specific exemptions for specific people. So that's why my bill is more all-encompassing of building materials. Our committee decided, or General and Housing decided, that we were actually going to put this language originally in our omnibus housing bill, which you all should get, I think, later this morning. And we looked at it, we had JFO in, and while there were many people, there were several sponsors in the committee, we decided to take it out for several different reasons. Some of the reasons were, one, the obvious, it takes away from the ed fund. I figured the chair would be happier to know that is out.
I hope everyone in the whole building feels good about taking care of the ed fund.
I think we can all agree that we do. JFO said they would be able to provide us a fiscal note. They just weren't able to do it in time, and we weren't comfortable without knowing what that hit to the ed fund would be. What our committee had originally looked at was, okay, let's look at just affordable housing projects, and can VHCB and VHFA really just focus on those two agencies. BHFA said, you know what, love this, it's a great idea. However, we have another plan that kind of goes in a different way. We're like, okay, let's not reinvent the wheel. So my bill was really just meant to be a conversation starter and looking at different creative ways to help our builders who are really doing some of the groundwork in our housing crisis. And like I said, it's absolutely it's just the start of a conversation. There are other ideas, and that's where I think Rep. Galfetti's bill comes in.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that my bill has, essentially the same idea, but I've drilled down a little bit further on what types of projects would qualify for the exemption. And the first idea that I had is to kind of follow in line with what was outlined in the housing bill last year, and to basically only projects that were mixed use, mixed income, and located in a designated downtown, new town center, growth center, or neighborhood development area would be able to apply for the exemption.
Mhm.
And then this morning, it came to me that the other way that you could go about it is put a threshold, a minimum threshold on the amount of sales tax you paid in. And I came up with a number of, like, if you paid $10,000 in sales tax, you can demonstrate that on your tax return. So the onus of providing documentation would be on the builder or person who's applied for the exemption, rather than having the tax department have to figure a bunch of stuff out. So it would be as heavy as a lift for them. And anybody who missed out on it, but it would kind of, give that option, especially to a lot of the builders on bigger projects, to apply for the refund rather of their sales tax. So those were the points that I had. And again, as Rep. Bartley said, this was a way to get the conversation moving on this topic. I think it's definitely got some real viability going forward to, reduce the overall building costs for new units. So that's what I've got to add.
I really appreciate both these bills. I think they're part of a general tension that I imagine that General and Housing Committee is really wrestling with, which is making building housing easier and less expensive would be great for everyone. It would also mean that we'd have more, capacity on our grant list. And how much can we cost the education fund to make that happen? Right now, it feels like not very much. And so how do we balance those two things? And so I'm curious, sort of putting that tension aside. I know that we have an existing exemption that's quite high. And balancing sort of, we want to make it easier for sort of the small projects, less expensive for the small projects to work versus less expensive for the big projects to work. And how you two think about sort of where you would want to put more of that tax incentive.
I mean, for me, I think it's definitely for a lot of the bigger projects. That's why you would put the threshold in there of 10K that you had paid in tax to qualify for the refund. Because I think that's, multi-unit mixed income, that's where we need to be focusing and drilling down on. And, I certainly don't want to see a situation where somebody who's building an $8 million house in Stowe can somehow qualify for this exemption, and how to kind of set the parameters so stuff like that isn't, happening. So that was why I had the idea to follow in line with the housing bill from last year and all the definitions that we came up with for priority housing, and then add that tax refund into it so that, for the builders that are, most builders I would think would take advantage of that, but the onus would be on them to get it done, to provide the paperwork and the backup for it, so that it's not such a, burden on the tax department to figure it all out.
Yeah, and that was something, so in H308, it was kept very vague for the purpose of, could my committee look at it, incorporate it? That was actually something that we had JFO come in and talk to us about, that what are already the current exemptions and what pieces we could manipulate to make it more viable for these builders. I think something that's really important to note is that we're always going to have McMansions, and Vermont is incredibly good at making subsidized housing, which is something I'm very proud of. But we really need to be focusing as well on the missing middle, like the, one family houses. I recently was in a housing summit and I was overhearing and someone made a comment about Maine. They were from Maine. And they're like, oh yeah, it's, housing's really expensive to build in our state. It starts at about 250. I said, million? I truly didn't understand what they were saying. I go, what? I don't understand. So I said, we're looking at 500,000 starting. They said, oh, for a house. And I said, no, for like an efficiency apartment. So I think the way I view the housing crisis is we have a toolbox. And I think it's our responsibility as legislators to put different tools in the toolboxes, because I think there are, towns that really need to have the smaller projects. They're not going to have a 20-unit project go up in their downtown. They might have a 2-unit project go up. So I think it's finding that right balance, finding that missing middle, and really helping provide more tools to our municipalities and our builders.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's interesting. I know JFO said they could possibly work something out, but back in 2021, when I was opposing the contractor registration process, I reached out to the tax department.
Yeah.
And I actually got some figures. And this was back in the day, so I'm sure it's gone up a lot then, but it was the tax department gave me purchases made by people who are engaged in the construction of residential maintenance and repair, single-family residential structures, multifamily residential structures, and other residential structures. Again, this is just residential. In a year, approximately $353 million in taxable purchases, or $21.2 million in sales and use tax has been received. So that was, again, in 2021.
So I think the problem, like they said, they felt very confident they could get it to us, but we were a policy committee and we don't have the extra week that you folks do up here. And we were really down to the wire, so we felt more comfortable knowing that. And I was kind of ready saying like, yeah, let's, we can take it out. Let's wait till next year. But actually several members of the committee said, no, we still want you to talk about it. So that's why I'm here today. Like I said, just start a conversation, but I'd love to connect with you offline and maybe get that information.
Thanks for taking that on.
I love it when information can be carried from year to year. Thank you for being able to even find that inside your. Yeah, other folks?
Yeah, I'm just curious, thank you for this idea. What percentage of a construction project is generally, do you know? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. Okay, it's building materials.
It's just about 3%. So it is
30%, they said?
3.
3% is the cost of building materials?
So it's not, this is not going to be a make it or break it for
Okay.
builders. I think that's probably why it's never really been done. Really right now, builders are really focused on permitting costs and appeals costs. A lot of, you are not the committee of jurisdiction, but I will just throw in a plug that permitting in the state is very duplicative. And builders have to go through pretty much the same exact permitting from multiple different departments. It's costly, it's timely. That's kind of what they're really focused on right now, their costs. And then, of course, the land itself and labor. Yes, labor is,
Yeah.
and that's half of the problem is, do we even have the workforce to build the housing that we need in the state? We don't have housing for them.
And fortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, most building in places where it's cheaper is done by undocumented labor. And we just don't have very much undocumented labor in this state.
Yeah.
We're willing, so I don't think that's like a policy solvable problem, but I think it's a lot of the problem, like a lot of the cost. Yeah.
So another comment that I can make, being on LCAR, we took a lot of testimony on the residential building energy standards and commercial building energy standards, which went into effect July 1st of last year. Huntington Homes testified that with the new residential building energy standards, an average 1,800 square foot home, it would increase the cost $30,300. So again, those sorts of things are huge too when it comes to construction costs for whether it's residential or commercial. Everything that we're talking about bumps it up.
And I think, you know, Oliver, one of the things that's one of my biggest frustrations about this general work in the legislature is we tend to layer things on and not have the time or capacity to dig in, take it apart, put it back together. And for better or for worse, at least we get to do that with property taxes this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how I really feel about that.
Grateful for the opportunity. Any other comments, questions on this, folks? Yeah.
I also appreciate the attention to building specifically in our designated downtowns and the places we're already populated. In Berry City, we have 4 square miles to build on, and it's the expanding to new areas is a logistics challenge just based off the amount of space we have, but it's also the huge expense of putting in new infrastructure. And this seems like a really good way to like focus on places where the infrastructure is already there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just appreciate, and just like the ed fund,
And
we're
it's,
also balancing like buyouts and the hit to the grand list with trying to bring new housing online. And so,
well, and it's an incentive too, right? It's not necessarily, as Rep Bartley was saying, the make or break for the project, but it's something to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit.
And I will say, I think there's some other legislation coming up that's really gonna focus on infrastructure.
We are gonna get a bill from the Housing and General and Housing Committee, next week, where I think.
It's actually not in there, what you're gonna.
Yes, but
Okay,
it used to be in there, right?
It was.
Okay.
coming
And so-
This year.
Okay.
Not hit, but shit, or whatever it is now.
Let's not talk about diff, but the language for this particular tax credit was in the bill that's about to come to us, right?
Yes.
Okay, and
that's
so
what
if
I'm
folks have thoughts about wanting to put it back in, give it some thought, do some work, we can talk about it next week.
And I will say it's not that loaded for you guys, so
Mhm.
it's just one small part, so.
Yes, yeah.
Hopefully it's not one of those crazy bills for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good idea.
Folks, we're gonna go to the floor and then please come back promptly after the floor.